Elena Rossi thought Christmas Eve would bring her one last humiliation before losing everything: her job, her dignity, and worst of all, custody of her traumatized 8-year-old brother. But when she publicly embarrassed the most feared man in Chicago during their blind date, she had no idea she was about to whisper the 4 words that would change both their lives forever. Nico Moretti had sworn off love after losing his family to violence, building walls so high that even bullets couldn't reach his heart. Yet one desperate woman's plea on a snowy sidewalk would crack open wounds he thought had healed, and awaken a protectiveness more dangerous than any enemy he'd ever faced. What Elena didn't know was that her mysterious stalker was already closing in, and the man she'd just humiliated might be the only thing standing between her family and total destruction. Make sure you subscribe and comment where you're watching from, because this Christmas miracle is about to become someone's worst nightmare. The alarm clock screamed at 5:30 a.m., but Elena Rossi was already awake. She'd been staring at the ceiling for an hour, counting bills in her head. Rent was due in 3 days. The grocery money was gone, and Luca needed new shoes. She rolled out of bed and tiptoed to the kitchen of their tiny apartment. The coffee maker gurgled to life, the one luxury she couldn't give up. Through the thin walls, she heard Mrs. Chen's TV already playing the morning news. "Luca, sweetheart," she knocked softly on his bedroom door. "Time to get ready." 8-year-old Luca emerged, his dark hair sticking up in every direction. He looked just like their father had at that age, all serious brown eyes and stubborn chin. But unlike their father, Luca hadn't spoken a word in 6 months. Not since the accident that took their parents and left Elena as his guardian. She helped him dress and made scrambled eggs with the last 3 eggs in the fridge. Luca ate quietly, his small hands steady on the fork. Sometimes Elena caught him watching her with those wise eyes, like he understood exactly how hard she was trying. "I'll pick you up right after school," she promised, kissing his forehead. "Ms. Rivera is expecting you at 3 for therapy, okay?" Luca nodded and shouldered his backpack. Elena walked him to the bus stop, her breath forming white clouds in the December air. Chicago winters were brutal, but this one felt especially cold. Maybe because she couldn't afford to turn the heat up above 60 degrees. The bus arrived with a wheeze of brakes. Luca climbed aboard without looking back. He never looked back anymore. Elena hurried to the diner, her second-hand coat pulled tight against the wind. Rosie's all-night diner sat on the corner of Lincoln and Clark, its neon sign flickering between open and ope. She'd worked there for 2 years, pulling double shifts whenever possible. "You're late," Frank called from behind the counter. Her manager was 60, bald, and perpetually cranky, but he paid cash at the end of every shift, which made up for a lot. "Sorry, Frank. Luca's bus was delayed." "Your kid problems ain't my problems, Rossi." Elena tied her apron and grabbed the coffee pot. The morning rush was already starting. Construction workers, nurses getting off night shifts, and office workers grabbing breakfast before the commute. She moved between tables with practiced efficiency, refilling cups and taking orders. At table 6, a businessman in an expensive suit complained about his eggs. "These are overcooked. I specifically said over easy." Elena looked at the perfectly runny yolks. "I can have the cook remake them if you'd like." "No, forget it. Just take it off my bill." She nodded and kept moving. The customer was always right, even when they were wrong, especially when tips meant the difference between groceries and going hungry. By noon, her feet ached and her back was sore from carrying heavy trays. But she'd made $63 in tips. Not bad for a Wednesday. "Elena," Frank's voice carried across the diner. "Come here." She approached the counter, wiping her hands on her apron. Frank's expression was harder than usual. "I'm letting you go." The words hit her like a punch to the stomach. "What?" "You left early on Monday for that kid's appointment. Yesterday you were distracted, messing up orders. I need someone reliable." "Frank, please. I've worked here for 2 years. I've never missed a shift except for emergencies." "The decision's made." He handed her an envelope. "Here's your last check." Elena's hands shook as she took the envelope. Inside was $180, barely enough to cover half the rent. "Frank, it's 3 days before Christmas. Please." "Sorry, kid. Maybe try the place on Michigan Avenue. They're always hiring." The place on Michigan Avenue was a strip club. Elena's cheeks burned with humiliation. She untied her apron with numb fingers and grabbed her purse from the employee lockers. Outside, the wind cut through her coat like a knife. She stood on the sidewalk, clutching the envelope, watching cars splash through puddles of slush. What was she going to tell Luca? How would she pay the rent? A black sedan pulled up across the street. The windows were tinted dark, but she could feel eyes watching her. The car had been there yesterday, too, parked in the same spot, and the day before that. Elena hurried down Lincoln Avenue, glancing over her shoulder. The car followed at a distance, never getting too close, but never falling too far behind. Her heart pounded against her ribs. She ducked into a coffee shop and waited by the window. The sedan idled outside for 10 minutes before finally driving away. Elena's hands trembled as she ordered a coffee she couldn't afford. Who would be watching her? And why? 3 hours later, Elena sat across from Mrs. Patterson, the social worker assigned to Luca's case. The woman's office smelled like disinfectant and disappointment. Case files covered every surface, and the fluorescent lights flickered overhead. "I'm concerned about the instability," Mrs. Patterson said, flipping through Luca's file. "You've changed apartments twice in 6 months. Now you're unemployed. I'll find another job. I always do. Elena, I know you're trying, but Luca needs consistency. He's been through tremendous trauma. If his living situation continues to be unstable, you'll take him away." Elena's voice came out as a whisper. Mrs. Patterson's expression softened slightly. "I don't want to, but my job is to protect children. Luca needs security, routine, proper medical care. Can you provide that?" Elena straightened in her chair. "Yes, I can provide that." "How?" "You just lost your job. You're behind on rent. Luca's therapy sessions cost money you don't have." Every word was true, but hearing them out loud made Elena's chest tight. "He's my brother. He belongs with me. I'm giving you 30 days to show improvement. Stable housing, steady income, regular therapy for Luca. If things don't change..." Elena left the social services building feeling hollow inside. 30 days. How could she fix everything in 30 days? Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Maria. "Still planning to ditch me tonight? Hot guy, good family, owns restaurants. What do you have to lose?" Elena stared at the message. The blind date. She'd forgotten all about it. Maria had been pushing her to go out, insisting that a good man with money could solve all her problems. "I can't afford dinner out," Elena texted back. "He's paying. Come on, it's Christmas Eve. Maybe Santa will bring you a Christmas miracle." Elena almost laughed. She didn't believe in miracles anymore, but she believed in desperation. And maybe, just maybe, this man could offer her the security Mrs. Patterson demanded. Not love, she wasn't naive enough to hope for that, but stability, safety for Luca. "What restaurant?" she texted. "Vincenzo's on Rush Street, 8 o'clock. Wear the red dress I bought you." Elena had never worn the red dress. It hung in her closet with the tag still on, a birthday gift she'd protested was too expensive. But Maria had insisted every woman needed one dress that made her feel beautiful. At 6 o'clock, Elena picked up Luca from therapy. Ms. Rivera, his counselor, met her at the door with a concerned expression. "He had a difficult session today," Ms. Rivera said quietly. "We talked about Christmas, and he became very agitated. He drew several pictures of your parents' accident." Elena's heart clenched. "Is that normal?" "It's part of the process. But Elena, he needs these sessions to continue. I'm worried about what might happen if his treatment is interrupted." Another reminder that she couldn't afford to fail. Elena took Luca's hand and led him to the bus stop. He was quieter than usual, his small fingers cold in hers. At home, Elena made grilled cheese sandwiches while Luca sat at their tiny kitchen table, coloring. She watched him work, his tongue poking out in concentration. He drew a house with stick figures, a tall man, a woman, and a small boy. A family. "That's beautiful, sweetheart." She kissed the top of his head. "Mrs. Chen is going to watch you tonight. I have to go out for a little while." Luca looked up at her with worried eyes. "It's just for a few hours. I'll be back before bedtime, I promise." She helped him into his pajamas and read him a story about a boy who befriended a dragon. Luca listened intently, his small body warm against her side. These quiet moments were what she lived for, when it felt like they were a real family, not just two people surviving. Mrs. Chen knocked at 7:30. The elderly woman had been their neighbor since Elena and Luca moved in, and she'd become a surrogate grandmother. She brought homemade soup when they were sick and always had candy in her pockets. "You look nervous, dear," Mrs. Chen said, settling onto the couch with Luca. "It's just a dinner." Elena smoothed the red dress over her hips. The fabric was softer than anything she owned, and the color brought out the warmth in her brown eyes. For a moment, she almost felt pretty. First dates are always scary, but maybe this one will be different. Elena hoped so. She needed it to be different. Vincenzo sat on Rush Street like a glittering jewel, all warm lights and expensive cars parked outside. Elena paid the cab driver with money she should have saved for groceries and stepped onto the sidewalk. Through the windows, she could see couples in evening wear, crystal glasses catching the candlelight. This was a mistake. She didn't belong here. The hostess, a stunning blonde in a black dress, looked Elena up and down with barely concealed disdain. "Do you have a reservation? I'm meeting someone? Nico Moretti?" The hostess's expression changed instantly. "Of course. Right this way, Miss Rossi. Elena Rossi." They walked through the dining room, past tables of laughing couples and business deals being made over wine. Elena felt every eye on her, judging her secondhand purse and discount shoes. The red dress suddenly felt like a costume. The hostess stopped at a corner table where a man sat alone, checking his phone. He looked up as they approached, and Elena's breath caught in her throat. Nico Moretti was nothing like she'd imagined. Maria had said he was handsome, successful, from a good family. She hadn't mentioned that he was dangerous. Everything about him screamed power, from his perfectly tailored suit to the way he held himself, like he owned not just this table, but the entire restaurant. His dark hair was styled precisely, and his brown eyes were the color of coffee, sharp and assessing. But it was more than his appearance. There was something in the way other diners glanced at him and quickly looked away, the way the waitstaff moved around his table with extra care. This wasn't just a successful businessman. This was a man people feared. Elena recognized him now. She'd seen his picture in the newspaper, always in connection with words like alleged and under investigation. Nico Moretti wasn't from a good family. He was from a crime family. "Miss Rossi," he said, standing as she approached. His voice was deep, controlled. "Please, sit." Elena remained frozen. Her mind raced through everything she knew about the Moretti name. Her neighbor, Mr. Giuseppe, always crossed himself when he saw their name in the paper. "Dangerous people," he'd mutter. "Stay away from dangerous people." Elena started, then stopped. She could leave. She could walk out right now and go back to her tiny apartment and her impossible bills and the threat of losing Luca. Or she could sit down and see if maybe, just maybe, this dangerous man could be her Christmas miracle. She sat down. Nico studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. "You look nervous." "I don't usually eat at places like this." The understatement of the year. "What places do you usually eat at?" "The diner where I worked, before I got fired today." She hadn't meant to say that. It just slipped out, along with all her fear and desperation. Nico's eyebrows rose slightly. "Today? 3 hours ago." Elena fidgeted with her napkin. "My friend Maria thought this would cheer me up. She said you were from a good family, and now you know better." The words hung between them like a challenge. Elena looked into his dark eyes and saw something she hadn't expected: loneliness. This powerful, dangerous man was as alone as she was. "I know who you are," she said quietly. "Then you know you should leave." "Probably." Elena picked up her water glass with trembling hands. "But I need this to work." "Need what to work?" "This. Us. Whatever this is supposed to be." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I have 30 days to prove I can take care of my brother, or they'll take him away from me. I need stability, security. I need someone who can help me keep my family together." Nico's expression didn't change, but something shifted behind his eyes. "You want to use me?" "Yes." The honesty felt like stepping off a cliff. "Maria said you were looking for someone to settle down with. I thought maybe we could help each other." "I see." Nico signaled the waiter, who appeared instantly. "Bring us the wine list." They sat in silence while the waiter presented options Elena couldn't pronounce, let alone afford. Nico ordered something that probably cost more than her monthly grocery budget. "Tell me about your brother," he said when they were alone again. "Luca. He's 8. He doesn't talk anymore, not since our parents died in a car accident 6 months ago. He's the most important thing in my life. And his father? The same man as my father. We're full siblings." Elena's cheeks burned. "I'm not asking you to be his dad. I just need help keeping him safe." The wine arrived, rich and red in crystal glasses. Nico tasted it and nodded approval. Elena had never drunk wine that wasn't from a box, but she sipped it anyway, hoping she looked like she belonged. "What makes you think I'd be interested in this arrangement?" Nico asked. Elena studied his face. The sharp cheekbones, the carefully controlled expression, the expensive watch on his wrist. "You're here, aren't you? On Christmas Eve, having dinner with a stranger your friend set you up with. That tells me you're lonely too." Nico's jaw tightened. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough." Elena took another sip of wine for courage. "I know you're powerful. I know people fear you. But I also know you showed up tonight, which means some part of you wants something you don't have. And what's that? Someone who sees you as more than your reputation." The word surprised them both. Elena hadn't planned to say anything so honest, so revealing, but something about Nico's careful mask made her want to crack it, to find the person underneath. Nico was quiet for a long moment, turning his wine glass in his hands. "You're very direct. I can't afford not to be. I have 30 days, remember? Your friend didn't tell you much about me, did she? She said you owned restaurants, that you came from money, that you were looking to settle down?" Elena paused. "She left out the part about you being connected to organized crime. Would it have mattered?" Elena considered this. A month ago, yes. She would have run screaming. But desperation changed everything. "I don't know. Maybe not." They ordered dinner. Food Elena couldn't identify, but that tasted better than anything she'd eaten in months. Nico asked careful questions about her life, her work, her plans for Luca. She found herself relaxing slightly, caught up in the strange intimacy of confession. "You never married?" she asked. Nico's expression shuddered. "Once." "What happened?" "She died." The simple words carried so much pain that Elena felt it like a physical blow. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." But the way he said it, the way his hand stilled on his wine glass, told Elena it might as well have been yesterday. This man carried his grief like armor, protecting himself from ever feeling that loss again. "Children?" she asked gently. "No." The word came out sharp, final. Subject closed. They finished dinner in relative silence, the easy conversation replaced by the weight of things unsaid. When the check came, Nico paid without looking at it. Elena glimpsed the total and felt dizzy. More money than she made in 2 weeks. Outside, snow had begun to fall, dusting the sidewalks and cars with white. Elena shivered in her thin coat, wishing she'd thought to bring gloves. "I'll call you a car," Nico said. "I can take the bus." "Not at this hour, not in that dress." Before Elena could protest, a black car pulled up to the curb. Not the same sedan that had been watching her earlier, but similar enough to make her nervous. "This is where we say goodbye," Nico said, holding the car door open. Elena looked up at him, snow catching in her dark hair. This was her one chance, her Christmas miracle. If she got in that car and went home, she'd never see him again. In 30 days, Luca would be gone. "What if I said I could make you happy?" she asked. Nico's expression softened slightly. "I'd say you're very young and very naive. I'm 27, and I've learned that sometimes naive is just another word for hopeful. Hope is dangerous in my world. More dangerous than despair?" Nico studied her face in the glow of the streetlight. Snow fell between them like a curtain, muffling the sounds of the city. For a moment, Elena thought she saw longing in his dark eyes. Then he stepped back. "Good night, Elena." She got in the car, defeated. The driver pulled away from the curb, and she watched Nico grow smaller in the rear window until he disappeared entirely. Back at her apartment, Mrs. Chen was knitting on the couch while Luca slept. "How was your date, dear?" "Fine," Elena lied, paying the elderly woman for babysitting with money she couldn't spare. After Mrs. Chen left, Elena stood in Luca's doorway watching him sleep. His dark hair fell across his forehead, and one small hand clutched his stuffed elephant. He looked so peaceful, so trusting that his big sister would keep him safe. Elena changed out of the red dress and hung it back in the closet. Tomorrow she'd start job hunting again. She'd figure out how to pay the rent, how to keep Luca in therapy, how to convince Mrs. Patterson that they were stable. She'd do it without Nico Moretti. But as she lay in bed staring at the ceiling, she couldn't stop thinking about the loneliness she'd seen in his eyes. It matched her own so perfectly, like two broken pieces that might fit together if given the chance. Outside, snow continued to fall, covering Chicago in pristine white. Christmas Eve was almost over, and Elena's miracle felt further away than ever. Elena woke to the sound of glass breaking. She bolted upright, heart hammering, and listened. Silence. Then footsteps in the hallway outside their apartment. She slipped out of bed and crept to Luca's room. He was still asleep, his small chest rising and falling peacefully. Elena grabbed the baseball bat she kept beside her dresser, a leftover from high school softball that now served as protection. The footsteps stopped outside their door. Elena held her breath, gripping the bat with sweaty palms. After what felt like hours, the footsteps moved away. A door slammed somewhere down the hall. She waited another 10 minutes before looking through the peephole. The hallway was empty except for broken glass from the overhead light fixture. Probably just kids, she told herself. Or maybe Mr. Rodriguez in 3B had been drinking again. But her hands shook as she made coffee at 5 a.m., and she couldn't stop checking the locks. At 7, she woke Luca gently. Christmas morning should have been special, but there were no presents under their tiny tree. Elena had spent her last $20 on a used book about dragons from the thrift store, wrapped in newspaper comics. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart," she whispered, kissing his forehead. Luca sat up and rubbed his eyes. He looked at the single gift by the tree, then at Elena with those wise, sad eyes that understood too much. "I know it's not much," Elena said, sitting on his bed, "but things are going to get better, I promise." Luca nodded and got dressed without being asked. He was too good, too understanding. 8-year-old boys should be demanding and noisy and difficult. They shouldn't be patient with poverty. After breakfast, the last of the cereal with milk that would expire today, Elena bundled Luca in his winter coat and they walked to the library. It was one of the few places they could spend the day for free, and Elena needed to use the computers to search for jobs online. The sidewalks were slippery with new snow, and the wind cut through Elena's thin jacket like ice. Luca walked beside her without complaint, his small hand in hers. "We'll stay until they close," Elena told him. "Then maybe we'll walk downtown and look at the Christmas lights." Luca squeezed her hand. Even without words, he knew how to comfort her. The library was nearly empty, just a few other people with nowhere else to go on Christmas Day. Elena settled Luca in the children's section with a stack of picture books and found a computer terminal. She spent 3 hours applying for jobs, waitressing positions, retail work, anything that didn't require experience she didn't have. Most places wouldn't even look at applications until after New Year's. Her 30-day deadline felt like a noose tightening around her throat. At noon, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Merry Christmas, Elena. I hope you and Luca are well." Her heart skipped. Nico? Somehow he'd gotten her number. Probably not difficult for a man with his resources. She stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Merry Christmas." Her phone rang immediately. "Hello?" she answered quietly, glancing around the library. "Where are you?" Nico's voice was warm, concerned. "The library. Why? On Christmas Day?" Elena's cheeks burned with embarrassment. "It's warm and free." Silence stretched between them. Elena could hear city sounds in the background. Cars, voices, the distant sound of music. "Have you eaten today?" Nico asked. "We had breakfast." "That's not what I asked." Elena closed her eyes. "We're fine, Nico. I'm sending a car." "No." The word came out sharper than she intended. "I told you last night. You told me you needed help. I'm offering help. I can take care of myself." "Elena." His voice gentled. "It's Christmas. No one should spend Christmas Day in the library because they have nowhere else to go." Tears stung her eyes. She looked across the children's section where Luca sat reading, his small shoulders hunched forward. He hadn't smiled once today. "Just lunch," Nico continued. "Nothing more. I have more food than I could eat in a week." Elena bit her lip. Pride warred with practicality. Pride was a luxury she couldn't afford. 1 hour, she said. 1 hour. 20 minutes later, the same black car from the night before pulled up outside the library. Elena gathered Luca and their things, her stomach tight with anxiety. She was making a mistake. She knew it. But Luca needed a real meal, and her refrigerator was empty. The driver was a middle-aged man with kind eyes who tipped his hat to Luca. "Afternoon, young man. First time in a car this fancy?" Luca nodded shyly, sliding across the leather seat to look out the window. Elena had never seen him so alert, so curious about anything. They drove through downtown Chicago, past the magnificent Christmas displays in store windows. Luca pressed his face to the glass, watching families hurry along the sidewalks carrying shopping bags and wrapped presents. The car turned onto a tree-lined street Elena had never seen before. The houses here weren't just big, they were estates. Sprawling mansions set back from the road behind iron gates and perfect landscaping. Old money, real money. They stopped in front of a house that looked like something from a movie. 3 stories of cream-colored stone with tall windows and a circular driveway. Gardens stretched in every direction, covered now with snow that looked like powdered sugar. "This is where Mr. Moretti lives," the driver said. "Don't worry, kid. He's not as scary as he looks." Elena wasn't so sure about that. Nico met them at the front door, and Elena's breath caught. He looked different in daylight, dressed in dark jeans and a gray sweater instead of his business suit. More human, almost approachable. "Elena?" He smiled, and the transformation was startling. "Luca." Luca stepped closer to Elena, suddenly shy. But his eyes were wide, taking in the marble foyer and the chandelier that probably cost more than their yearly rent. "Thank you for coming," Nico said. "I wasn't sure you would." "We can't stay long," Elena said quickly. "Of course. Just lunch." He led them through rooms that belonged in museums. Persian rugs, oil paintings, furniture that looked like antiques. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and somehow cold, like a house that was decorated but not really lived in. The dining room could have seated 20 people, but a smaller table by the windows had been set for 3. Luca's eyes went straight to the view, gardens rolling down to a small lake, all covered in pristine snow. "You can explore after we eat," Nico told him. "There are ducks that live by the water, though they might be hiding today because of the snow." Luca looked at Elena questioningly. She nodded, and he smiled. The first real smile she'd seen in days. Lunch was simple but perfect. Grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, fresh bread that was still warm. Elena tried to eat slowly, to maintain some dignity, but she was hungrier than she'd realized. Luca ate with the focused intensity of a child who wasn't sure when his next meal would come. "How old are you, Luca?" Nico asked. Luca held up 8 fingers. 8. That's a good age. Do you like school?" Luca nodded, then glanced at Elena uncertainly. "He's very smart," Elena said. He just doesn't talk much since his parents died. Nico's voice was matter of fact, not pitying. That makes sense. Sometimes when sad things happen, words don't feel important anymore. Luca stared at Nico with new interest. Most adults either ignored his silence or tried too hard to get him to speak. Nico was doing neither. After lunch, Nico kept his promise about exploring. He walked them through the gardens, pointing out places where flowers would bloom in spring. Luca found a family of stone rabbits half buried in snow and spent 10 minutes carefully brushing them clean. He's a good kid, Nico said quietly, standing beside Elena. The best. Elena watched her brother with fierce love. He deserves so much more than I can give him. You're doing fine. Am I? Yesterday, he drew pictures of the car accident during therapy. Today, we spent Christmas morning in the library because I can't afford heat. How is that fine? Nico was quiet for a moment. When I was his age, my father was shot in our living room. I hid in the closet and listened to him die. Elena sucked in a breath. Nico. I didn't speak for 2 years after that. Not a word. My mother tried everything. Doctors, therapists, bribes, threats. Nothing worked. What changed? Time. And someone who understood that silence isn't always empty. Sometimes it's the only safe place left. Elena looked at him with new eyes. This powerful, dangerous man had once been a traumatized child. I'm sorry. Don't be. It taught me that healing happens on its own timeline. You can't force it. They watched Luca build a small snowman near the lake, his cheeks red from the cold, but his movements more animated than Elena had seen in months. The therapy helps, she said, but I can't afford to continue it much longer. How much does it cost? It doesn't matter. I won't take your money. Why not? Elena turned to face him fully. Because I know what kind of man you are. And I know that everything comes with a price. Nico's expression hardened slightly. You think I'd hurt you? I think you'd expect something in return, and I'm not naive enough to pretend I don't know what that would be. You're right. His honesty surprised her. I would expect something in return, but maybe not what you think. Before Elena could ask what he meant, Luca came running over, his small hands full of snow. He held it out to Nico proudly. A gift. Nico accepted the snow with complete seriousness. Thank you. This is exactly what I needed. Luca giggled, the first sound Elena had heard him make in weeks. The giggle turned into actual laughter when Nico pretended to eat the snow and made an exaggerated face. Elena's heart clenched. When was the last time she'd seen Luca truly happy? They stayed another hour until the winter sun began to set and Luca's energy finally flagged. In the car ride home, he fell asleep against Elena's shoulder, exhausted from the most normal afternoon he'd had in months. He likes you, Elena said to Nico, who had insisted on riding with them. I like him too. He reminds me of myself at that age. Broken? Surviving. They pulled up outside Elena's apartment building. The contrast was jarring. From Nico's estate to this run-down complex with its broken streetlights and graffitied walls. Nico looked out the window, his jaw tight. This isn't safe. It's what I can afford. Elena, thank you for today. She gathered the still sleeping Luca in her arms. Lunch was wonderful, but this doesn't change anything. She was out of the car before Nico could respond, carrying Luca toward their building. But she felt his eyes on her back, and she heard the car door slam as he followed. Wait. Elena turned on the steps. Nico, please, just go. Have dinner with me tomorrow. Why? Because I haven't enjoyed a meal this much in years. Because Luca smiled today. Because, he paused, searching for words. Because I think we could help each other. I already told you, not the way you think. Nico stepped closer, his voice dropping. I meant what I said about healing happening on its own timeline. Maybe that applies to more than just grief. Elena studied his face in the glow of the broken streetlight. What are you really asking me? I'm asking you to give us a chance. A real chance. Not some desperate arrangement, but something genuine. You don't know me. I know you love your brother enough to humiliate yourself with strangers. I know you're proud and stubborn and willing to sacrifice anything for family. I know you see past reputations to the person underneath. Nico's voice gentled. And I know you're alone, just like I am. Elena's throat tightened. I can't afford to get involved with someone like you. Someone like what? Dangerous. Complicated. Someone who could disappear from my life and take my heart with them. The words hung in the cold air between them. Elena hadn't meant to be so honest, so raw, but something about Nico stripped away her usual defenses. I won't disappear, he said quietly. You can't promise that. Not in your world. Then maybe I need to find a different world. Before Elena could respond, Luca stirred in her arms, mumbling something in his sleep. Elena looked down at him, this small boy who'd lost so much and deserved so much more. Tomorrow, she heard herself say. Dinner tomorrow, but just dinner. Nico smiled, that transformative smile that made him look years younger. Just dinner. Elena carried Luca upstairs to their apartment, hyper-aware of Nico watching until they were safely inside. Through the window, she saw the black car pull away, disappearing into the Chicago night. She tucked Luca into bed, his small face peaceful for the first time in weeks. In his sleep, he whispered a single word, "Papa." Elena's heart broke a little. Luca had never called their father that. It was too formal, too distant. But somehow, in his dreams, he'd found a word for the safety he craved. Elena sat by his bed for a long time, watching him sleep and wondering if she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Nico Moretti was everything she should avoid. Dangerous, powerful, connected to a world that destroyed families. But he was also the first person in months who'd made Luca laugh. The first person who'd looked at their broken little family and seen something worth protecting. Maybe that was worth the risk. Outside, snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the distance, church bells chimed midnight. Christmas was over, but Elena felt like something new was beginning, something that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She fell asleep in the chair beside Luca's bed, dreaming of laughter and snowmen and the way Nico had smiled when her brother offered him a handful of snow. In her dreams, they were safe, they were whole, they were home. Elena stood in front of her closet the next evening, staring at the red dress. She'd changed clothes 3 times already, settling on a simple black sweater and jeans, then switching to a blue dress that made her look washed out, then back to the jeans. Nothing felt right, nothing felt like her. "Just wear what makes you comfortable," she muttered to herself, reaching for a gray cardigan. But as her fingers touched the soft wool, she heard Luca's laughter from yesterday. Pure and delighted and so rare. She pulled out the red dress. Mrs. Chen arrived at 7 to watch Luca, carrying a container of homemade cookies and her knitting bag. "You look beautiful, dear, like a movie star." Elena smoothed her hands over the dress nervously. "It's too much, isn't it?" "Nonsense. Sometimes a woman needs to feel beautiful." Mrs. Chen settled on the couch where Luca was building with blocks, a Christmas gift from their neighbor. "Now go, have fun. Don't worry about us." The same black car waited outside. Elena had expected it this time, but her stomach still fluttered with nerves. The driver smiled in the rearview mirror as they pulled away from the curb. "Nice evening for a drive," he said. "Not too cold." "Yes," Elena agreed, though she barely noticed the weather. Her mind was spinning with doubts. What was she doing? What did she think would happen tonight? They drove through downtown Chicago, past restaurants and shops glowing with warm light. But instead of stopping at another upscale establishment, the car turned onto a quiet residential street and pulled up in front of a small, family-owned Italian place Elena had walked past 100 times but never entered. Nico stood waiting on the sidewalk, and Elena's breath caught. He wore dark jeans and a leather jacket, looking more like someone she might actually date than the intimidating businessman from 2 nights ago. "I thought we'd try somewhere different," he said, opening her car door. "More normal." The restaurant was tiny, maybe 15 tables crammed into a space that felt like someone's grandmother's dining room. The walls were covered with family photos, and the air smelled like garlic and fresh bread. A heavy-set woman with gray hair spotted them immediately. "Nico," she called in accented English. "Madonna, look how skinny you are. Come, come. I have your table." She swept over and embraced Nico like a long-lost son, then turned sharp eyes on Elena. "And who is this beautiful girl?" "Mrs. Benedetti, this is Elena." "Elena, this is the woman who's been trying to fatten me up for 20 years. Because you never eat enough." Mrs. Benedetti pinched his cheek affectionately, then beamed at Elena. "Finally, he brings a nice girl. Come sit. I'll bring you something special." She led them to a corner table, lit by candles and wine bottles. The intimacy of the space made Elena hyper-aware of Nico's proximity, the way his hands moved when he talked, the careful way he watched her face. "This place doesn't look like somewhere you'd normally go," Elena said. "It's not. I usually eat at business dinners, hotel restaurants, places where deals are made." Nico looked around the small dining room with something like fondness. "But Mrs. Benedetti has been feeding my family for 30 years. She doesn't care about reputations or business. She just cooks." Elena understood. This was neutral territory, a place where he could just be a man having dinner, not a dangerous businessman with a complicated past. Mrs. Benedetti returned with wine and a parade of dishes Elena hadn't ordered. Antipasto, fresh pasta, chicken that fell off the bone. "Eat, eat," she commanded. "Both of you, too skinny." The food was incredible, rich and comforting in a way that made Elena's tiny apartment kitchen feel even more inadequate. But she found herself relaxing despite her nerves, drawn in by the warmth of the place and the easy way Nico talked to the other diners who stopped by their table. "You're different here," she observed during a quiet moment. "Different how?" "Less controlled, more human." Nico smiled. "Maybe because here I'm just Nico. Not a boss or a businessman or whatever the newspapers call me this week." "What do they call you?" "You don't want to know." Elena studied his face in the candlelight. "Tell me anyway." Nico was quiet for a moment, turning his wine glass in his hands. "Alleged crime boss, person of interest, suspected of racketeering, money laundering, conspiracy. The list goes on. Are the allegations true?" "Some of them." The honesty hit Elena like a punch. She'd expected denials, justifications, careful lawyer speak. Not this stark admission. "Which ones?" she asked quietly. "Does it matter?" "It might." Nico leaned back in his chair. "My family has been in Chicago for 4 generations. We started with nothing. Immigrants from Sicily who worked construction and saved every penny. By the time my grandfather took over, we owned restaurants, construction companies, a trucking business. All legitimate. And then other families decided we were competition. They came after us with violence, so we learned to use violence back. They corrupted judges and police, so we learned to play that game too." His voice was matter-of-fact, like he was discussing the weather. "You adapt or you die, Elena. That's how it works." Elena felt cold despite the warm restaurant. "So you became criminals." "We became survivors." Nico's eyes met hers. "I won't lie to you about what I am. I've done things you'd consider wrong, but I've never hurt an innocent person, and I've never broken a promise. That's supposed to make me feel better? It's supposed to help you understand who you're really having dinner with." Elena looked around the restaurant, at families sharing meals, at Mrs. Benedetti fussing over a young couple in the corner, at the photos on the walls showing decades of celebrations and love. This felt real, safe, normal. But the man across from her was not normal, would never be normal. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked. "Because you deserve to know. Before this goes any further, you deserve to understand what you'd be getting into." "And what would I be getting into?" Nico was quiet for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "Protection, security, safety for you and Luca, but also scrutiny, questions, people who will judge you for being with me." "What about love?" The question slipped out before Elena could stop it. "What about it? Is that part of what I'd be getting into?" Nico's expression softened. "I haven't loved anyone in a very long time, Elena. I'm not sure I remember how. But you want to remember." "Yes." The single word carried weight. "Yes, I do." They finished dinner in relative silence, the weight of confession settling between them. Mrs. Benedetti packed leftovers in containers and kissed both their cheeks goodbye, extracting a promise from Nico to bring Elena back soon. Outside, snow had begun falling again, fat, lazy flakes that caught in Elena's hair and melted on her cheeks. She stood on the sidewalk, suddenly reluctant to get in the car and end this strange, honest evening. "Walk with me," Nico said, as if reading her thoughts. They strolled down the quiet street, past shops closed for the evening and apartments glowing with warm light. Elena pulled her coat tighter against the cold, hyper-aware of Nico walking beside her. "Tell me about your marriage," she said suddenly. Nico's steps slowed. "Why?" "Because you're asking me to trust you with my life, with Luca's life. I need to understand who you really are." They stopped under a streetlight, snow swirling around them like a snow globe. Nico's face was half in shadow, but Elena could see the pain that flickered across his features. "Her name was Isabella," he said quietly. "We met in college. She was studying art. I was studying business. She knew about my family, but she didn't care. She said she could see the good in me. What happened to her? She got pregnant. We were so happy. Planning the nursery, picking names, imagining what our child would look like." Nico's voice grew distant. "A rival family decided to send a message. They planted a bomb in her car." Elena's hand flew to her mouth. "Oh my God. I lost them both, Isabella and our son. In one moment, my entire future disappeared." Tears stung Elena's eyes. "How long ago?" 5 years. But it feels like yesterday sometimes." Elena understood now why he'd pulled away from emotion, why he'd built walls so high that nobody could reach him. "You blame yourself. I should have protected them. That was my job, and I failed. It wasn't your fault. Wasn't it?" Nico looked at her with haunted eyes. "I knew what I was. I knew the dangers. But I was selfish. I wanted love, wanted a family, and I put them at risk. So you decided never to love anyone again." It seemed safer, for everyone involved. Elena stepped closer, snow dusting her dark hair. "What changed your mind?" "You did. Yesterday. Watching Luca laugh. It reminded me what I'd been missing, what I'd been hiding from. Nico's voice dropped to a whisper. And last night, you asked me what was more dangerous, hope or despair. I realized I'd been living with despair for 5 years, and it was killing me slowly. Hope is scary, Elena admitted. Terrifying. They stood facing each other in the falling snow, two broken people who'd found something unexpected in each other. Elena felt the pull between them, not just attraction, but recognition. He understood loss. He understood the weight of protecting someone you loved more than your own life. If we do this, she said quietly, if we try, what does that look like? I don't know. Nico's honesty was brutal and comforting at the same time. I only know that when I'm with you and Luca, I feel like the man I was before, the man I thought I'd lost forever. And when you're not with us, Nico's jaw tightened. When I'm not with you, I remember why I can't have this. Elena reached out without thinking, her gloved hand touching his cheek. Maybe you can. Maybe we both can. Elena, I know it's crazy. I know you're dangerous and I'm broke and we're probably the worst possible match in the world. But yesterday was the first time Luca has been truly happy since our parents died. And tonight, she paused, searching for words. Tonight I feel like myself again. Not just a guardian or a survivor, but a woman. Nico covered her hand with his, holding it against his face. I can't promise this will be easy. I'm not asking for easy. I'm asking for real. It would be real. His voice was rough with emotion, more real than anything I've felt in years. They stood there for a long moment, snow falling around them, the weight of decision hanging between them. Elena thought about Luca sleeping peacefully in their apartment, about Mrs. Patterson's 30-day deadline, about the empty refrigerator and the overdue bills. But mostly she thought about the way Nico had looked at her brother yesterday, not with pity or awkwardness, but with understanding. The way he'd accepted a handful of snow like it was the most precious gift in the world. Okay, she whispered. Okay, let's try. Let's see if two broken people can figure out how to be whole together. Nico's smile was brilliant against the white snow. He leaned down and kissed her. Soft, careful, full of promise and possibility. Elena felt something crack open in her chest, something she'd kept locked away since her parents died. Hope. Dangerous, terrifying, beautiful hope. When they broke apart, Elena was breathless. Now what? Now we take it one day at a time. Nico's thumb brushed across her cheek. And we see what happens when we stop running from what we want. They walked back to the car hand in hand, leaving footprints in the fresh snow. As they drove through the quiet Chicago streets, Elena felt like she was crossing some invisible threshold. Behind her lay months of struggle and loneliness. Ahead lay uncertainty, but also possibility. For the first time in her adult life, she wasn't facing the future alone. The car pulled up outside her apartment building, but this time Nico walked her to the door. In the harsh light of the hallway, reality crept back in. The peeling paint, the broken mailboxes, the smell of cigarettes and despair. This really isn't safe, Nico said again, his protective instincts flaring. It's temporary. Elena unlocked her door. Everything is temporary right now. It doesn't have to be. Elena turned to face him, her hand on the doorknob. Don't offer to fix my life tonight. Let me keep some dignity. Elena? I mean it, Nico. Whatever this is between us, it has to be built on choice, not desperation. I won't be a charity case, even yours. Nico studied her face, then nodded slowly. You're right. I'm sorry. Thank you for dinner. For everything. Tomorrow? Elena hesitated. Moving too fast would be dangerous for both of them, but especially for Luca. Maybe we could do something with Luca. Something normal. The zoo? In December? Nico smiled. The aquarium, then. Luca would like the dolphins. He would. Elena felt her own smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Okay, the aquarium. I'll pick you up at noon. Elena watched him walk away, then slipped inside her apartment. Mrs. Chen was asleep on the couch, her knitting in her lap. Elena covered her with a blanket and checked on Luca, still sleeping peacefully, his stuffed elephant clutched to his chest. She changed into pajamas and washed her face, studying her reflection in the bathroom mirror. She looked different somehow, brighter, like someone who'd remembered how to hope. In bed, Elena stared at the ceiling and thought about the impossible choice she'd just made. Nico Moretti was everything rational thought told her to avoid. He was dangerous, complicated, connected to a world that could destroy everything she held dear. But he was also the first person in months who'd looked at her fractured family and seen something worth protecting. The first person who'd made Luca laugh. The first person who'd made Elena remember she was more than just a survivor. Maybe that was worth the risk. Maybe love was always worth the risk. Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing Chicago in pristine white. Elena fell asleep to the sound of wind against her windows, dreaming of dolphins and laughter and the promise of tomorrow. The aquarium was crowded with families enjoying the holiday week, but Luca didn't seem to mind. He pressed his small hands against the glass of the beluga whale exhibit, his eyes wide with wonder. Elena stood behind him, watching his face light up as the massive white whale glided past. "They're so gentle," she murmured to Nico, who stood beside her with his hands shoved deep in his coat pockets. "The whales or the children?" Elena looked around at the families surrounding them, parents chasing toddlers, teenagers taking selfies, elderly grandparents moving slowly but smiling at everything. Normal people living normal lives. Both, I think. Nico had been different today. Quieter, more watchful. Elena had noticed his security detail, 2 men in dark suits who stayed far enough back to blend into the crowd, but never let them out of sight. The reminder of his world felt intrusive here among the families and field trips. "Papa, look!" The word came out so clearly, so naturally, that it took Elena a moment to realize what had happened. She spun around to find Luca tugging on Nico's jacket, pointing excitedly at a seal that was spinning underwater. Luca had spoken. For the first time in 6 months, her little brother had spoken, and he'd called Nico Papa. Elena's eyes filled with tears as she watched Nico kneel down to Luca's level, his expression stunned and tender. "I see him," Nico said quietly. "He's showing off for you." Luca giggled and pressed closer to the glass. "He likes me." "Of course he does. What's not to like?" Elena covered her mouth with her hands, overwhelmed by the simple joy of hearing Luca's voice again. She'd started to worry that he might never speak, that the trauma had stolen that from him forever. But here, feeling safe and happy, he'd found his voice again. Nico stood and moved to Elena's side. "Are you okay?" "He hasn't spoken since the accident." Elena wiped tears from her cheeks. "His therapist said it might take months, maybe years, and he feels safe," Nico said simply. "He called you Papa." "I noticed." Elena studied Nico's face, looking for some sign of how he felt about that, but his expression was carefully controlled, giving nothing away. They spent 2 more hours at the aquarium, with Luca chattering excitedly about everything he saw. Schools of tropical fish, graceful stingrays, a massive octopus that seemed to watch them back. His voice was rusty from disuse, but growing stronger with each word. "Can we come back?" he asked as they walked toward the exit. "Maybe," Elena said carefully. She didn't want to make promises she couldn't keep. "I'll bring you back," Nico said. "Whenever you want." Luca beamed and slipped his small hand into Nico's large one. Elena's heart clenched at the sight. Her brother was bonding with a man who lived in a world of violence and danger. What did that mean for all of them? They had lunch at a family restaurant near the aquarium. Nothing fancy, just burgers and milkshakes and the comfortable chaos of families eating together. Luca told them everything he'd learned about marine life, his words tumbling over each other in his excitement to be heard again. "The whales can live to be 100 years old," he announced, "and they have to come up to breathe air just like us." "That's amazing," Elena said, smiling at his enthusiasm. "Nico, do you know how to swim?" "I do. Do you?" Luca's face fell. "Mama was going to teach me this summer." The silence that followed was heavy with grief. Elena reached across the table to squeeze Luca's hand, but Nico spoke first. "I could teach you, if you'd like. I have a pool at my house." "You do?" Luca's eyes lit up again. "It's too cold to swim now, but in the summer, when it's warm, could Elena come too?" "Of course." Elena felt a flutter of panic. Summer was months away. Was Nico really planning for them to still be in his life that long, or was he just being kind to a grieving child? After lunch, they walked through Lincoln Park Zoo, free and less crowded in the cold weather. Luca ran ahead to the penguin exhibit while Elena and Nico followed at a slower pace. "Thank you," Elena said, "for today, for getting him to talk again. I didn't do anything. You made him feel safe. That's everything." Nico was quiet for a moment. "He called me Papa. I noticed. Does that bother you?" "It should." Nico's voice was thoughtful. "It should terrify me, getting that attached to a child, but it doesn't?" "No, it feels—" He paused, searching for words. "It feels right, like something I've been missing without knowing it." Elena's chest tightened with a mixture of hope and fear. "Nico, you need to understand. If this doesn't work out, if you change your mind, it would destroy him. He's already lost so much." "I know. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, this feels like you're playing house with our lives. And I need to know, are you serious about us? Or is this just some fantasy that you'll get tired of?" Nico stopped walking and turned to face her. His dark eyes were intense, serious. "Elena, I lost a child once. I know what that kind of loss does to a person. I would never, ever put Luca through that unless I was certain. Are you certain? I'm certain that I want to be. I'm certain that when I look at you and Luca, I see the life I thought I'd lost forever. And I'm certain that I'll do whatever it takes to protect that. Elena searched his face, looking for doubt or hesitation. She found none. What does that mean exactly? Protecting us? Nico's jaw tightened slightly. It means making sure nothing from my world ever touches yours. It means keeping you safe no matter what that requires. And if keeping us safe means walking away, then I'd walk away. The words came out rough like they hurt to say. But I don't think it will come to that. How can you be sure? Because I'm very good at what I do, Elena. And what I do is protect the people I care about. They rejoined Luca at the penguin exhibit where he was explaining to another child how penguins keep warm in Antarctica. Elena watched him with amazement. This morning he'd been silent, and now he was chatting with strangers like he'd never stopped talking. He's different when you're around, she told Nico quietly. Different how? Confident? Happy? Like the little boy he used to be before everything went wrong. Maybe he remembers what it feels like to have a father figure. Elena's throat tightened. Maybe. As the afternoon wore on, Elena found herself relaxing despite her concerns. Watching Nico with Luca felt natural, easy. He had infinite patience for her brother's questions and observations. He listened like Luca's words were the most important things in the world. This was what she'd wanted for Luca. Stability, safety, someone who would love him unconditionally. But she'd never imagined it would come packaged with so much danger and complication. The drive home was quiet, with Luca dozing against Elena's shoulder, exhausted from his first day of talking in months. Nico's car was warm and comfortable, insulated from the harsh December wind. What happens now? Elena asked softly. What do you want to happen? I want to keep you both safe and happy, but I don't know how to do that. Nico reached over and took her free hand. Let me worry about keeping you safe. You focus on being happy. It's not that simple. Why not? Elena looked down at Luca's sleeping face. Because happiness feels dangerous, like something that can be taken away at any moment. Everything can be taken away, Elena. That doesn't mean we stop reaching for it. They pulled up outside her apartment building, and reality crashed back in. The broken streetlights, the graffitied walls, the general atmosphere of decay and neglect. This wasn't the world where families took trips to aquariums and made plans for summer swimming lessons. Come home with me, Nico said quietly. What? Both of you. Come stay at my house tonight, just for tonight. Elena's instinct was to refuse. But Luca was sleeping peacefully for the first time in weeks, and her apartment was cold and empty. More than that, she didn't want this perfect day to end. One night, she said. One night. Nico carried Luca inside while Elena gathered a few things. The little boy woke up briefly as they transferred him to Nico's car, but he settled back into sleep immediately, trusting and content. At Nico's house, they put Luca to bed in one of the guest rooms, a space bigger than Elena's entire apartment, with windows overlooking the snow-covered gardens. Luca barely stirred as Elena tucked him in. He looks peaceful, Nico said from the doorway. He is peaceful. That's what scares me. Why? Elena smoothed Luca's hair back from his forehead. Because he's getting attached to this. To you. And I don't know how to explain to an 8-year-old why some things are too good to last. Who says they can't last? Elena turned to look at Nico. In the soft light from the bedside lamp, he looked younger, less guarded. Your world says so. My world says so. Reality says so. Maybe it's time to create a new reality. Before Elena could respond, Nico's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. Problem? Elena asked. Work. His expression hardened. I need to take this. He stepped into the hallway, and Elena heard his voice drop into the cold, controlled tone she recognized from their first dinner. This was the other Nico, the dangerous one, the one who lived in shadows and dealt with threats she couldn't imagine. When he returned 10 minutes later, the transformation was complete. The warm, patient man who'd spent the day with them was gone, replaced by someone harder, more distant. Everything okay? Elena asked, though she could see it wasn't. It will be. Nico's tone was clipped, professional. You should get some sleep. Tomorrow? Tomorrow what? Tomorrow I'll take you home. Elena felt like she'd been slapped. Just like that? Elena? No, don't explain. I understand. She stood up, her spine straight with wounded pride. This was fun while it lasted, but reality called and reminded you who you really are. That's not what this is, isn't it? Elena moved past him toward the door. You get a phone call about business, and suddenly you can't wait to get rid of us. Nico caught her arm gently. I'm not trying to get rid of you. I'm trying to protect you. From what? Nico was silent for a long moment. From me. From the choices I have to make. From the part of my life that you can never be part of. Elena pulled her arm free. You don't get to make that decision for me. Yes, I do. Because you don't understand what you'd be risking. Then explain it to me. I can't. Nico's voice was rough with frustration. Some things you're better off not knowing. Elena stared at him, hurt and angry and confused. So that's it? One perfect day and then you shut me out because of a phone call? Elena, please. Trust me on this. Trust you? Elena laughed bitterly. You won't even tell me what's happening. How can I trust you when you won't trust me? Nico ran his hands through his hair, and for a moment Elena saw the man from this afternoon, conflicted, vulnerable, wanting something he didn't think he could have. There are people who want to hurt me, he said finally, and they'll hurt you and Luca to get to me. Tonight, that threat became very real. Elena's anger faded, replaced by cold fear. What kind of threat? The kind that means I can't have you in my life, not the way I want to. So you're just giving up? Just like that? I'm being realistic. You're being a coward. Nico's eyes flashed. Excuse me? You heard me. You're letting fear make your decisions, just like I have been for months. Elena stepped closer, her voice rising. We could have something real, something beautiful, but you'd rather hide behind walls and pretend that being alone is safer. It is safer. Maybe, but it's also empty and lonely and no way to live. They stared at each other across the elegantly furnished guest room, two people who wanted the same thing but were too afraid to reach for it. Elena, Nico said quietly, I can't lose you the way I lost Isabella. I won't survive that again. And I can't lose Luca because I was too afraid to fight for something good. Elena's voice broke slightly. But maybe that's the difference between us. You've given up on hope. I haven't. Before Nico could respond, a small voice came from the bed. Elena? Nico? Why are you fighting? They both turned to find Luca sitting up, rubbing his eyes. He looked small and confused in the big bed, and Elena's heart broke a little. We're not fighting, sweetheart, she said, moving to sit beside him. We're just talking. You sounded angry. Luca looked between them with worried eyes. Are you going to leave? Elena glanced at Nico, who was standing frozen in the doorway. The pain on his face was unmistakable. I don't know, Elena said honestly. Maybe. Luca's lower lip trembled. I don't want to leave. I like it here. I like Nico. I know you do. And Nico likes us too. Don't you, Nico? Nico moved to the bed and knelt down beside it, bringing himself to Luca's eye level. I like you very much, Luca. More than I thought possible. Then why would we leave? Because sometimes grown-ups have to make difficult decisions to keep the people they love safe. But we're safe here. We're safe with you. Nico's composure cracked slightly. You might not always be safe with me, and I couldn't live with myself if something happened to you because of me. Luca was quiet for a moment, processing this with the surprising wisdom of a child who'd learned too much about loss too young. When Mama and Papa died, he said slowly, I was scared all the time, but Elena took care of me even though she was scared too. She said families stick together no matter what. Elena's eyes filled with tears. She'd had no idea Luca understood so much about their situation. That's right, she whispered. So if we're a family now, we should stick together too. Luca looked at Nico with serious eyes. Right? Nico was silent for a long moment, his hands clenched at his sides. Elena could see the war playing out across his features. Love battling fear, hope battling experience. It's not that simple, little man, he said finally. Why not? Because... Nico paused, searching for words an 8-year-old could understand. Because sometimes the people who love you have to go away to protect you. That's stupid, Luca said with startling bluntness. Despite everything, Elena almost smiled. Luca, it is stupid. If people love each other, they should stay together and fight the scary things together. That's what families do. Out of the mouths of babes, Elena thought. Her 8-year-old brother had just cut through all their fears and complications to the simple truth at the center of everything. Love meant staying and fighting, not running and hiding. Elena looked at Nico, who was staring at Luca with something like awe. He's right, she said quietly. We're stronger together than we are apart. Elena, no, listen to me. I know you're scared. I'm terrified too. But I'm more afraid of spending the rest of my life wondering what might have been if we'd been brave enough to try. Nico stood slowly, his expression tormented. You don't understand what you're asking. Then help me understand. Stop shutting me out, and help me understand. For a moment, Elena thought he would. She could see him wavering, torn between his protective instincts and his desire for connection. Then his phone buzzed again, and the moment was lost. I have to go, he said, all emotion draining from his voice. There's something I have to handle. Now? It's almost midnight. Yes, now. Nico was already moving toward the door. Stay here tonight. Tomorrow we'll talk about getting you somewhere safer. Nico, wait. but he was gone, leaving Elena and Luca alone in the beautiful guest room with its view of snow-covered gardens and its promise of safety that felt increasingly fragile. Elena held Luca until he fell back asleep, her mind racing. She understood now that loving Nico meant accepting that his world would always intrude, that there would always be phone calls in the night, and threats she couldn't see coming. The question was whether the love was worth the fear. Looking down at Luca's peaceful face, she thought maybe it was. Because for the first time in months, her brother felt safe enough to speak, to laugh, to call someone Papa. Maybe that was worth fighting for, no matter how dangerous the fight became. Outside, snow continued to fall, and somewhere in the house, Elena could hear Nico's voice on the phone, cold, efficient, dealing with whatever crisis had pulled him away from them. She closed her eyes and tried not to think about what morning would bring.